All right, Johnny, it's grade time. How did Perry do with his roster construction at the start of the season? And then would your grade change at the end of the season? We're going to share our grades and we're going to give Perry a report card on this episode. And are you in on Jo Adell becoming a star, or is he just a role player? And did you hear? Did you hear about what Victor Rojas tweeted last week? It shook the Halo world, and we're going to talk about it. You're Locked On with Mike and Jon, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And Jon and I thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can give us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can like, comment, and subscribe and click the bell to be notified every time a new episode drops. And today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts.
We are so glad that you decided to join us for this edition of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is Jon, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother Jon.
And if you're watching on the YouTube side, Mike is reporting live from the void. Mike, how is it there in the fourth dimension?
It feels like I'm floating, huh?
I had to do it.
From the void.
Mike, we want to talk about Perry Minasian and give him a grade for his roster construction, how we felt at the beginning of the season versus how we felt toward the end of the season. And coming into 2022, there were a lot of things that I think Perry Minasian did well to address the issues within the Halos. Look, the bullpen was probably the biggest problem in 21. Yeah. And when you think about Shohei Ohtani having 9 wins last season, a lot of those wins, he would have had a lot more wins if the bullpen hadn't have blown it for him later on in the game.
Right.
We saw that happen with Patrick Sandoval this season in 22. A lot of lack of run support for a guy who pitched very well. So going back to 21, imagine we're here a year ago and we're starting to wonder how Perry Minasian is going to construct a roster for 22. Let's look at some of the names that he brought in. Aaron Loup, Ryan Tepera, he had Tyler Wade, he had Matt Duffy, he had Michael Lorenzen, Noah Syndergaard, Raisel Iglesias got extended, and Archie Bradley also for the bullpen. So let's go back a year and just, how did you feel about that back then? What kind of grade would you have given him?
Well, I think I would give him a higher grade simply because he extended Raisel, and we were advocates for that. I know
Big
all
time.
Angel fans wanted to see him get extended, and I think that was a really good move.
It
was
sense.
a good move for 2 reasons. 1, it helps the back end of the bullpen, and 2, Perry, I think, listened to the fans, and they're a fan of Raisel, right?
Right.
And I know that this season he wasn't the Raisel that we expected, and then he went to the Braves and became Raisel again. And maybe it's just a matter of him actually being in competitive games. We've talked about this on the show before, that when Raisel comes in and it's a non-save situation, he really struggles. When comes in and it's a save situation, he can inherit the bases loaded in the 8th inning and he can dominate the Mariners, right?
Get 6 outs, yeah.
Absolutely. And so I was excited about that deal. I was excited about Noah Syndergaard. You and I have talked often about, hey, it'd be great if we got Noah Syndergaard and give him an opportunity. And then we did. And so that was exciting. And then Michael Lorenzen was a big question mark, but he was an arm that we thought could eat up some innings. And he's got the arms to prove that he can eat up some innings.
The biceps.
The big biceps, right? And I loved the 3 names that he signed for the bullpen: Loup, Tepera, and Bradley. That was 6, 7, and 8 right there. And with Raisel Iglesias in the 9 spot at the end of the game. And so, Johnny, I'm going to say, without talking about this season, if I could erase that and just talk about where I was last season and knowing he would sign these guys, I would give Perry Minasian a high B+ for the signings that he made. I'm going to cross maybe even into the A- range.
Wow.
Simply because I like that he addressed the issues without actually breaking the bank. And I think he's going to have to do that again this offseason. But you can't tell me that we weren't excited about Aaron Loop and his under 1 ERA,
I know.
or Ryan Tepera coming in, and even somebody like Noah Syndergaard, who was coming off surgery. I mean, there was a lot of potential with him, and Lorenzen had that opportunity to really prove himself. And the good thing about Lorenzen is he could be a starter, but if he failed to be a starter, he could be a long reliever for us. And so there was double duty that he could pull. So I'm going to go high B, maybe low A, when it comes to where we were at this point last season and how Perry addressed our offseason needs. Where would you land if we could go back a year and these were the names that were laid in front of us as signings for the Angels?
I would have given him a B- because I like how he fixed the bullpen. In theory, he fixed the bullpen because we needed some proven arms, and he went out and got those. He extended Raisel Iglesias. You and I talked since March of 21 how much we'd love to see Syndergaard in our rotation, and he went and got him and sold him on the 1-year deal. Yeah. Mike, to me, Michael Lorenzen was a big question mark, and I think our friend Andrew from Angels Top Plays went on the record to say, this feels like a in the bullpen by the middle of the year kind of signing.
Yes.
And I didn't disagree with him. I thought the same thing. Right. And even though he didn't go to the bullpen, we did lose a lot of Michael Lorenzen in 22. The one thing that keeps me from giving him such a good grade is the fact that they were going to move Fletcher to shortstop and have kind of a revolving door at second base. Tyler Wade was somebody I was actually excited about because I saw his speed. I saw the way that he could, put down the bunt. And then when the season came, they just didn't utilize him very well. He also was struggling with bunting well. And so that proved to not be a great move. And then, of course, he was gone, by the summertime. And so I thought that he could have locked up that middle infield much better than he did, because then we had to roll with Andrew Velasquez all season. David Fletcher got hurt. And so it just felt like that was a big hole in the lineup. Now, you and I said you could disguise a big hole in the lineup at shortstop / second base because you have Ohtani and Trout and Rendon and Walsh. And who could have guessed that we'd go through such injury issues in 2022? So I would have given him a B- at the beginning of the season. But now, how do we feel about it post 2022? You start.
I'm going to say C-, maybe even D, and if D's exist still. And here's why. One, because of what he did during the season to address the injuries. Jonathan VR is not going to solve the problem, and he proved that, right?
Absolutely
Phil
not.
Gosselin is not going to solve the problem, and he proved that. Now, I'm a fan of Phil because Phil is a hustler, and Phil was really good for
and he showed up at the Dodgers-Padres game last night, apparently.
Yeah, he's a good
dude,
nights
right?
Ago. Yeah, he's a good dude, right?
No, literally, the goose was on the field at the Dodgers-Padres game.
Oh, that's right. There was a goose on the field. Yeah, it was his cousin. It was his distant cousin.
That's right.
And so those are the things that I think that really lower the grade for me. And Archie Bradley and his injury history. Now, Perry didn't know that these guys are going to get hurt. Perry didn't know that Archie's going to not be able to leap over the dugout fence and hurt himself and all that stuff, right? But I do think that there is a connection between, I'm going to sign these players and I'm going to trust that you're going to use these players appropriately and correctly. And as you pointed out, we have Tyler Wade. Why aren't we bunting? We have Tyler Wade. Right. Why aren't we doing the things that Tyler Wade can do? Right. We have a guy like Aaron Loop. Let's bring him in at the right time, not at the wrong time. Same thing with Ryan Tepera. And a part of their struggles, I think, was because they weren't used correctly. And as Joe's book has pointed out, there was a lot of discussion about how they were going to use the bullpen before and after, and even sometimes during the games. And that's the thing that I think really lowers the grade for me. It feels like Perry didn't know, or Perry thought he knew about the coaching staff and the manager that he had and how he was going to use these players. And it almost felt like you gave tools to the wrong guy. And I think that's why Joe was fired. And so that's why I'm going to say C-, maybe even a D, because the manager we had didn't know what to do with the tools that were in his tool belt.
Yeah, you don't go 0-12 with this roster. And I understand there were injuries and things like that. You should at least go 500, maybe even 4-8. But to have this roster, to fix the bullpen, like we've all been clamoring for, to sign pitching. Well, he finally went out and did it. And that's why I think I'm going to give him a C+ because the area that was an issue was the offense. And we saw that through the summer months. We saw that through June and July and August. The guys couldn't catch up to the fastball. We had no depth. Yeah. You're bringing in guys that are castaways from other teams that didn't want them anymore. You're bringing up Jose Rojas to play third base all the time. Just can't do that. And so while I was excited to address the pitching side of things, the lack of offense, which was a surprise, but you have to anticipate that. You have to anticipate you're not going to have Rendon for a full year, Trout for a full year, even a young guy like Jared Walsh. You have to anticipate that something could go wrong, and then you need to find that depth. Unfortunately for him, Taylor Ward and Rengifo had breakthrough years, so we do have a little bit more depth when it comes to those guys. But I think Perry's going to have to move in terms of depth this offseason and get some backups, get some fill-ins that are not going to be a negative WAR, be a negative producer on the field. We need that desperately this season. And we have to be able to count on those guys to step up. In fact, you and I are going to have a conversation maybe in a few episodes. I want to look at what these playoff teams did when they lost their best stars. You lose Tatis to a motorcycle thing and then a PED suspension. What did San Diego do? You lose Mookie Betts. You bring in Trace Thompson if you're the Dodgers. I want to look at and examine where they got their depth and how they utilized it. So I'm looking forward to that conversation coming up. But again, I think a C+ at the end of the day, because he really did go out and get the pieces he should have for the bullpen, even though they didn't quite work out. And like you said, I think it has everything to do with the tools that were given to the manager and the lack of utilization.
Well, coming up on today's episode, Victor Rojas tweeted last week, and it stirred the Halo world, or maybe it just stirred our world, Johnny. We'll talk all about it. But first, Locked On Angels is brought to you by Bet Online. It's your number one source for all your football betting info this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you can find. And as always, Bet Online remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including baseball playoffs, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts.
We want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Mike, you and I came across a very interesting tweet a couple of weeks ago, and that was from our buddy Jared Timms, who does some great side-by-sides on YouTube. He's got a great eye for seeing how a batting stance changes or how a pitcher's delivery changes. And he posted a side-by-side of Jo Adell. One side was a Jo Adell home run from one of the last series the Angels played. The other side was a Jo Adell at bat in May. And in the video where Joe hits the home run, he starts with his back elbow a little higher, the hands are lower, and he has a whole new path from the bat to the ball. He's also leading with the bottom and the bottom hand and the elbow instead of the top. And he doesn't have his front side flying open as we have seen. So it was a great way to see where Joe has been and what Joe has been working on. Now, you and I observed how shortening up his swing has actually proven to be very effective for him. Give him that Trout swing. Give him that ability to bring the hands in and hit something out, because Joe's got power, man. And so this side-by-side got us thinking, are we still in on Jo Adell being a star for the Halos, or do you think he's just going to be a role player? Why don't you start us?
Well, isn't it funny when you talk about somebody's batting stance, it's just natural to all of a sudden start to like model
do it.
You know, like as you were talking, it was great because you were like, and his hands are here and his elbows up here. Like you have to automatically do that. You can't.
That's
just
great
talk
for
about
our audio listeners, by the way.
Audio listeners, it was awesome. Just so you know, John's got a great batting stance. So, am I in on Joe being a star, or am I out and he's just going to be a role player? Johnny, right now, I'm going to say that I'm in on Jo Adell being a star because of his age and because there seems to be a willingness to adjust. I think the Jo Adell that we've seen in AAA is the Jo Adell that we can get in the major leagues. And I think that we got to give him maybe this season, perhaps even next season. I know that some Angel fans, that's going to be exhausting, but I think about Taylor Ward developing at 28 years old and Jo Adell still being in his early 20s.
When Hefo's like 25, 26, and he's just coming around now.
Yeah, right. And so I think that Jo has got a great future ahead of him. I just think that we got to get the right people around him. And
yes, not Jeremy Reed.
The example is, yes, Buddy Carlisle was a really big help in the minor leagues to Reed Detmers when he got sent down. And they immediately identified what he was struggling with. And so if I'm Perry, if I'm the front office, I'm getting Jo around the guys that are going to be really beneficial. Maybe when we talked about this on yesterday's show, when I talked about what Mike Trout is sharing with the front office and Mike actually like advocating for the young players, maybe get him around Mike and just let Mike,
absolutely,
get your hands here and swing through here, because what Trout has in a swing is going to be an effective swing when he's 40. Because his hands come through so quickly, and it's not a long bat. If you watch Jo earlier this year, he's got a long bat. The barrel takes a long time to get through the strike zone, which is why he will strike out a lot, or it's why he will pop the ball up a lot, because when your bat head is slow, you're not hitting the ball and barreling it is what they call it.
Right.
And so Jo, I think, has a lot of potential to grow. I didn't mean to rhyme there. A lot of potential to grow.
Yeah, you did.
Simply because he's somebody that I think is going to be really spectacular for the future. And I think the Angels have an opportunity with this guy to help him to continue to develop and be the player that he needs to be. Now, I know defensively he's got to work on some stuff too, but I think offensively I'd love to see him really grow and become somebody that we have expected him to become. What do you think?
I'm not sold on, or I should say I'm not out on Jo Adell either, because he is 23 years old. I think that he has a bright future ahead of him. And I think that we're very quick to rush prospects. And I think that's the one mistake the Angels made, was bringing him up when he was 20 in 2020. I don't think they needed to do that. It was exciting at the time, but he clearly wasn't ready. Now, here's my thing about Jo Adell. Let's get him into therapy. Let's get him into a place where he can talk things through, because the guy lacks confidence when he's on the major league roster. When he's on AAA, he can crush it. Mike, I hate bringing up our softball experience, but let me just say this really fast. When you and I were on the same team, I wasn't always very good. And every now and then people would be like, hey, we need a fill-in player. John, would you mind playing on our team? And when I did, and it was just me, I would crush it. I would make diving plays in the outfield. I would do incredible things that I've never done before. And it's something I call little brother syndrome, where, oh, my big brother's around, I got to step it up. And I think it really got in my head. And so when Jo Adell comes to the major leagues, I think he gets little brother syndrome. He's a big fish in a small pond in AAA. However, I think he could be a whale in the ocean with the Angels if he just had more confidence and gave himself more credit. I also think that Mike Trout could definitely be somebody to mentor him, help him out. And why not? Because if Mike Trout was my big brother, I'd want that. No offense to you, but the fact that he could teach me things and help me be like him, I think Jo really needs to spend time with Mike Trout. I honestly hope that we get some information about that, because Trout needs to be a mentor to Jo Adell in the same way that Pujols was to Trout, and helped him grow and helped him get adjusted to the big leagues. I think Trout needs to take that experience he had in his first 10 years, turn around and give that to some of these young guys, even like Mickey Moniak as well. Like, turn around and mentor these young guys. And I think if he does that, you could see a big turnaround for Jo Adell. I'm still convinced we need a left fielder in 2023, and that Jo could play a bench role in 23. But as we know, injuries can happen at any time, and that would mean Jo could step into that role in left field. and have some opportunities to fill in every now and then when he needs to.
Johnny, former play-by-play guy for the Halos, our favorite, Victor Rojas, was on the Twitters. He was on the Twitters the other day and just talking about the Halos and talking about baseball. And he actually tweeted out something really funny from SNL the other day. They introduced a new character and talked about being a Dominican, being from that area. It was really great. And then somebody said, Victor, we miss you. And he responded with, well, I miss you too. And then they said, Victor, would you ever come back? And Johnny, he tweeted, yes, all caps with 3 exclamation points.
On this one and on that one.
and I backflipped. I think I immediately screenshotted it and
sent it to me.
And sent it to you. And then we had some sort of interaction. Man, Victor Rojas is so good. And I know he left because of his wife and her health issues. And he also became the general manager of a minor league baseball team and wanted to be home more often. But I got to think that he probably stepped away as well, because after however long he called games for this team, almost 10 years, I think, it's got to be annoying to just continue to call a team that has all sorts of potential, but doesn't actually have that potential turn into performance. And it's got to be frustrating. And then after the 2020 COVID shortened season, and then with the strike kind of looming, I could see why Victor was like, you know what, I think I need to take a break. But John, if Victor came back, how incredible would it be to have Victor call some games with Gubaza, and then Matty V call some games with Gubaza, with, of course, Mark Gubaza being the Glubaza that holds everything together. What would you say to that, Johnny?
I would love that, Mike. And honestly, like, as much as I love Matt Vasgersian, if Victor ended up doing it full time, I'd be fine with that as well. But if they're going to have him under contract like they do, and they do the split games, and Matty V is calling the games that are, more on the East Coast, to have Victor be the other half of that equation would be so cool. I miss Victor Rojas a lot. And one thing that I appreciated about him, as you mentioned, as the Angels struggled, Victor was honest about it. Victor, you could tell that he, didn't, it was upsetting to him when the Angels struggled, and it was frustrating. And he was a fan. I related to it as a fan. And he's not a fan in the sense that everything's chipper and everything's great. He's a fan that feels what we feel. He's a fan who struggles when we struggle. We understand that the Angels are frustrating, and he understood that too. So I think Victor gives a very real voice to the broadcast booth, and he really understands Angel fans. I think he really understands the team and the players who were there. I miss his big fly calls. I miss big fly Ohtani-san. Or never a fan of drive home safely. I think you could do better. But all that to say, I think Victor Rojas is awesome. And for me, we had a chance to talk with him last year on a Twitter space, and he answered some questions from Halo fans. And one of the things I was able to share with him is how I thought it was really cool and bold of him to go after the GM position when it was open with the Angels. He had a whole presentation ready. They gave him the interview. I think that he deserved the interview. And to go get this experience in Texas with the AA team, it just makes sense. And if that's something he wants to do at the major league level someday, that would be pretty cool. But also, now he's got even more information and insight to bring back to the broadcast booth. And I would love to know his thoughts on the insights that he has into player development in AA, and even down to doing special events at the AA games. We all know that minor leaguers have more fun, especially at their stadiums. They have way better giveaways and food and all that kind of stuff. All that to say, I would love it if Victor Rojas came back, and whether that was full time or splitting time with Matty V, that would just be ideal for me.
All right, so what would you rather have? Victor in the booth or Victor in the organization helping to develop these players, maybe being an assistant to Perry Minasian or an assistant to Alex Taman? Where would you like to have him?
I think I'd like him in the booth, selfishly. I'd rather just listen to him and talk. I mean, honestly, let him do both. Why not?
Why not? Well, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. Now make your second listen to Locked On MLB Podcast with our friend Paul Francis Sullivan. He's bringing humor, passion, and a unique perspective on every team, talking about all of the playoffs right now, and he's excited about that. You can follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, be sure you get into our social media this weekend because we are going to be doing a Mailbag Monday. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, it is. And that's our first Mailbag Monday for the, well, quote unquote, off season. It's off season for us, not for every team. But we would love to hear your thoughts on what we talked about today, maybe having Victor back in the booth, or what grade you would give Perry Minasian, or questions that you might have about the off season, things that are kind of stirring in you. And so we'd love to answer all of those questions on Monday. So you can tweet at us. You can actually send us a direct message. We're on Instagram as well. And you can call us on our voicemail, 714-409-6396, and that will be in the show description if you'd like to call us. Call and leave a voicemail. We'd love to hear the sultry sounds of your voice.
Hey, get at us on Twitter at Locked On Angels, and of course at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. I usually run a story on Super Halo Bros so that you can respond directly to the question for any questions you might have for Monday Mailbag. All right, y'all. Until Monday's show, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Angels. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.